Good morning, everyone. I'm Rhonda Pringle, Market President and Publisher of the Baltimore Business Journal. Welcome to our Future of Manufacturing panel discussion. We'll be asking local business leaders about the state of the manufacturing industry in Maryland, what the future holds, and how the pandemic is reshaping the industry. We want to hear your thoughts. So if at any time you want to comment on today's discussion, please feel free to post it using our question panel, and our event staff will share it. Thank you to our partner sponsors, CFG Bank and Merit Properties, for supporting today's manufacturing discussion. Before we hear from our panel, let's hear a word from our sponsors.
CFG Bank is proud to support the Baltimore Business Journal's Future of Manufacturing event and the Maryland manufacturing industry. CFG Bank offers innovative and entrepreneurial solutions for all of your commercial banking needs. Creative lending and primary cash management tools make CFG an excellent choice.
Thank you again. You can download more about our sponsors and panelists in the handout section of the control panel. Now I would like to welcome BBJ's Editor-in-Chief, Joanna Sullivan, to introduce today's moderator.
Thank you, Rhonda, and good morning. Maryland is a center for manufacturing innovation, and Greater Baltimore has always been its nexus. The region has a rich history of making things, and it continues to play a vital role in the growth of the local economy. From Howard County to Carroll County, we're writing about the demand for positions that are needed to be filled. We're seeing that manufacturers are creating unique ways to advance the products they create. As the economic recovery continues, manufacturers are taking the lessons they've learned during the last year, and they're figuring out what can be done to withstand future disruption. Now I'll turn it over to BBJ reporter Holden Willen, who will lead today's Future of Manufacturing discussion. Holden?
Thank you, Joanna. I'm Holden Willen, reporter at the BBJ. I report on money, public companies, politics, and today, the manufacturing industry. Welcome to the Baltimore Business Journal's Future of Manufacturing panel discussion. Today, we will discuss how manufacturers in Maryland adapted during the pandemic and what those changes will mean for our city and region going forward. We will also address climate change and what manufacturers can do to hit sustainability targets. Joining me today are Dr. Mike Galiazzo of the Regional Manufacturing Institute of Maryland, or RMI, Drew Greenblatt of Marlin Steel Wire, Arion Long of Femly, Aaron Tomarchio, Tradepoint Atlantic, and Matt Williams from Mount Royal Soaps. Thank you all for being here today. Let's get started. The pandemic obviously had a huge impact on everyone and businesses across every industry. How did it affect your company and how did you adapt? Let's start with Drew.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it. This pandemic was unbelievable. It was a tsunami. We shifted from having a very optimistic outlook based on building all kinds of aerospace racks and baskets for a booming travel market, all made in America, shipping all over the world, to all of a sudden, all of our aerospace clients dying, quickly laying people off, grounding airplanes, putting airplanes into deserts. So we had to shift because I have this wonderful team of amazing employees. We had to figure out a way to make them stay part of our team and be productive. How do you do it? So we looked around at a couple different industries and we zeroed in on medical and healthcare. We started making CDC test tube racks to fight COVID. We also made sanitizer stands where you push the little button and out comes the gel and you can wash your hands. We also made IV poles for medical patients at hospitals. So we shifted our company from an aerospace platform, 100% focused on medical. And because of that, we're actually growing, and we had our best year ever. And we added 56% to our factory floor space in February. So the pivot, the shift worked for us, and we're thriving and prospering despite this terrible experience.
And Arion, we obviously saw, toilet paper flying off the shelves and other hygienic products, being bought at huge quantities. You're in the hygienic products business, obviously. How did the pandemic impact Femly and your business, and how did you adapt?
Right. It was absolutely crazy. We were manufacturing our feminine hygiene products in Rome, Italy prior to the pandemic. And when things shut down, Italy was one of the first countries to be affected. Along with that, we immediately saw the rise of organic cotton increase by over 30%. So one of the things that we did early on in the beginning was to pivot into making face masks. And in 95, at a time where nobody had them. And I remember looking back, and in the first couple of weeks, we sold about 40,000 face masks. So that pivot allowed us to stay afloat. Along with that, we also saw that people were wanting to order things at home and remain safe while social distancing. So we also had the perfect feminine hygiene product that would get delivered to you. And we grew about 50% month over month during the pandemic.
Wow. And Matt, how did the pandemic affect you guys? Obviously, you're making soap, so similar. We saw a lot of obviously those products flying off the shelves. How did the pandemic affect you guys, and how did you adapt?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm one of the owners of Mount Royal Soaps. Man, it's been a whirlwind, craziest 15, 18 months of our lives. Prior to the pandemic, we had a retail operation. We had a storefront where we were making natural skincare products like lotions, soaps, and all of these really nice high-end products in a little 500 square foot kitchen in our little shop in the neighborhood of Remington. As the pandemic hit, we had some know-how on how to make products, and hand sanitizer was one of them, and soap was another. And lo and behold, it's so odd to say, but just an incredible growth story for us. Where we're being called by the mayor's office, by the University of Maryland Medical Center, by Johns Hopkins, by all these institutions to supply hand sanitizer and soaps. And prior to the pandemic, we were not a business to business operation. We were direct to consumer retail, work with grocery stores and places like that. So this really, we did the best we could to meet the demand, and we were able to hire about 8 to 10 employees, and we now have a facility that's 10,000 square feet in the heart of Baltimore. So it's just been a whirlwind, a lot of gratitude to make something out of this terrible mess, and to employ people in the city has just been an amazing opportunity that I don't know how we could have foreseen it. We somehow were able to make a product that was really needed and continues to be needed. So grateful to talk further about it, and thank you.
So Aaron, at Tradepoint, you've obviously got a unique view into what manufacturers are doing. And we just heard what some of our manufacturers did last year. How did the pandemic impact Tradepoint's operations, and what changes did you see companies making in their supply chain?
Sure, absolutely. Tradepoint, we were kind of in a unique situation where we had tenants that are really part of the supply chain, needing to continue their operations, and then we had construction projects that were trying to meet a deadline. So, for us, our tenants continue to operate 24/7. They were listed as essential businesses when the closure decisions were being made. One thing I can tell you is, from our port facility aspects, we were importing raw material. We continue to take in some of the imports of raw material. These were probably products that were already on a vessel headed to the U.S. And then they ended up just sitting in our storage yards for a while. And I can tell you, if I drive down there today, those storage yards are near empty. So just they did this shift in, this pause in our manufacturing operations in the country. And then now there's this incredible demand for these raw materials that we were bringing into the port, and it's pretty much empty. And I'll have to say also, Maryland did a really good job at managing kind of the closure process and providing a little bit of stability in a very uncertain time. And that allowed companies like ours, companies like Amazon, Home Depot, Floor & Decor, and our other operations here to continue to operate, because I think just the level of preparedness and stability that was projected by Maryland and incredibly also Baltimore County allowed us to continue to move our products to completion, and we continue to build. So for us, the pace picked up; it never slowed down. And now, post pandemic, we're on fire. There's a lot of demand for the products that our customers here are moving in and out of their facilities each and every day. And then there's demand for more industrial warehouse distribution and manufacturing space. So, it's like the pandemic hit the accelerator for us, as opposed to the brake maybe in some other industries.
It's interesting. We've heard all of you talk about how like last year ended up being your biggest years and a boom for you guys. Dr. Galiazzo, I'd love to kind of get a broader perspective from you. How did you see the manufacturing industry evolve last year, and what do you think is going to stick around in the post-pandemic where all those things begin to normalize?
That's a great question, Holden. Thank you. And I appreciate being here today. And also just want to mention that I represent an association of manufacturers. So I'm not really speaking from a specific company perspective. And when you talk about the industry evolving, so many people don't realize that manufacturing really includes a wide variety of companies. So there's a lot of different kinds of evolution that occurred. I would just like to talk about three of them because I think these are going to stick for the future. The first one is Zoom. The second one is at-home work. And the third one is having a safe work environment. And that third one is really, really important, as Drew Greenblatt knows, that we need to make sure that our work environment will continue to protect employees from COVID. And there seems to be some evidence that we may see another COVID comeback, so to speak. Drew and I want to mention this. Governor Hogan put together a task force of manufacturers when we were closed down to say, what do we need to do to open up? And I want to say Drew Greenblatt was really instrumental in moving that along quickly. And one of the items that came out of that was the importance of upgrading your air ventilation systems. Now, you hear that a lot on TV right now. And the reason why that it's important is because it helps mitigate against closing down your company. Your employees get sick, your company can't operate. And I do want to say that RMI, Regional Manufacturing Institute, just launched a program, a cost-free program to any manufacturer in the state to have our engineers go in, do an audit of their heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, and recommend to the Maryland Energy Administration funding for those. So I want to mention that. That's like critically important because the future really is about keeping the places open. Work at home, clearly that's going to stick. Okay, so work environment's going to stick. Working at home is going to stick for different types of manufacturers. I know some very large companies that they have looked at the real estate that they're currently invested in and saying, hey, you know what, we're better off if certain employees work at home. And then finally, Zoom. I mean, what can we say? That's what we're doing right now. And the benefit of Zoom, and I think the reason why it's going to stick, it's so much more efficient to get people together, to communicate, to collaborate on issues. So those would be the three aspects of what was going on during COVID. As a result of COVID, COVID was a catalyst for all the things that everybody talked about, plus much, much more. But fundamentally, it proved the importance of digital technologies and transforming manufacturing.
And Drew, did you want to add anything to that? Obviously, Dr. Galiazzo is talking about the role that you played. You talked about how how Marlin Steel transformed last year. What do you think is going to stick from the last year going forward?
I think the biggest thing that's going to stick is everybody understands that you can't have all your eggs in the China basket. The supply chain cannot trust 100% of our manufactured goods coming from that country or outside of America. We have to have a blended supply chain where in many cases it makes sense to have safety stock or factories in the USA make for you. Otherwise, it could devastate your company. CEOs and purchasing managers have to realize that the future is going to be making things more local, like in Baltimore, like in Maryland, so that we can thrive as a nation and not have a sword over our head in case the Chinese Communist government doesn't want to ship products to us for their reasons. So it's incredibly important that American factories, American buyers realize some of the supply chain has to be domestic. It creates great jobs and the products are made more clean.
What about you, Matt? You talked about the changes you had last year. What do you think is going to stick? Are you seeing some of those similar changes in your supply chain?
I mean, I couldn't agree more with Drew's sentiment there. We actually worked with China on getting a lot of different supplies, including bottles and pumps, and there was a major shortage, and we were successful with them early on, but it has become very expensive from what I understand now, and we prefer to source everything domestically. But yeah, there's been strange shortages over the past few months. Like one of them was just getting box dividers and different packaging has become difficult at times. But in general, the sentiment that I want to get across to Drew's point is, how do we make sure that the institutions and the state are making sure that they're doing substantial purchasing locally? I'm so grateful for some of the local institutions in Baltimore City, like the University of Maryland Medical Center. I got to give a shout out to Mr. Justin Graves, because he used a small company like ours to make sure that hand sanitizer demand was met over the course of the past year to a major hospital. That is just insane that a company like ours was able to do that and take over a contract formerly held by a huge company called Purell. So I think it behooves everyone in these industries to try to do that. So part of my work now is to continue to press these institutions to continue to do that.
So I want to kind of take a look at the industry in Maryland overall, manufacturing in Maryland overall. 4 years ago, we held a Future of Manufacturing event at the Museum of Industry, and we heard a lot about the promise of the industry in Maryland and what the companies who were represented on the panel at that time were doing. Currently, we have about 4,000 manufacturers in Maryland, and according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, as of April, there were a little over 104,000 manufacturing jobs in the state, which is about 1% more than that last panel 4 years ago. And actually, yesterday we had the latest numbers come out, and we lost 300 manufacturing jobs in the last month in May. But it's not much of a percentage change compared to 4 years ago. How would you describe the current state of Maryland's manufacturing industry? And I'd love to start with you, Dr. Galiazzo.
First of all, I just wanted to say that I was at that event 4 years ago. It was an amazing event. I was a moderator actually for that panel. And in a way, we were kind of talking about some of the same issues that we're talking about today, minus the COVID impact. All right. Holden, when I looked at that question, I just thought to myself, the answer is in the question. Who accepts 1% increase in something that they value? As an advocate for Maryland manufacturing for several decades, I think it's fair to say that we have so much more in the area of growth that we should be accomplishing. We should be not talking about 1% growth. We should be talking about 10% growth. So if we can get to the point where public policy makers and the industry as a whole says, let's work together for a new vision to move manufacturing forward.
And what about you, Aaron? Again, you've got that interesting different lens into manufacturing from Tradepoint. What do you think is the state of the industry right now?
Sure, absolutely. And speaking to you from the former home of Bethlehem Steel, where that was the iconic symbol of manufacturing in the era. And I would challenge our viewers and the panel and anybody kind of looking at this to think about what manufacturing really means, and are we bringing to the table the idea of manufacturing from a 20th century lens, or are we looking at it with a 21st century lens and what that looks like? And I bring this to you because the conversations I've had, in the community, talking about, the desire to have manufacturing return to Sparrows Point because it was this iconic location where that happened. And I think the idea of bringing back manufacturing to the scale that it existed in the 20th century it's very different. So I think we have to challenge ourselves with what perceptions we're bringing to the table and what manufacturing is. I think that the manufacturing kind of concept has really grown a little bit. For us, when I look at it from Tradepoint, there are operations here where we're bringing in some finished product, but there's a value added component that is being put into finishing that product to get it to the final destination. And the idea that new industries are going to start taking shape here in Maryland, offshore wind to be an example. There are wonderful manufacturing opportunities that will come with that as well. But also the idea of a big, large scale manufacturing operation, I think, again, is that 20th century view. I think manufacturing is going to happen on a much smaller scale. And to Drew's point about the idea of needing to localize our manufacturing to ensure that we have a local supply chain that can make sure that it can be resilient when we have situations like a COVID-19 epidemic, to build that capacity into our supply chain system. So, think smaller scale, think value added. And, the idea of a large scale steel mill, that I think is a concept of the past. And manufacturing is going to include a lot more technology, a lot more opportunity for innovation, and definitely happen on a smaller, more localized scale.
And to what you were talking about earlier, Dr. Galiazzo, we've been talking about some of these issues or some of these topics for a few years, minus the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, we saw companies innovating and using automation and technology to improve productivity and efficiency. The concern there has always been, what does that mean for jobs? At the same time, though, right now what we're hearing is companies are having a hard time finding the skilled labor for the jobs they have available. I guess I want to talk to the manufacturers a little bit about, are you having a hard time finding workers, and what do you think about that gap? Let's start with you, Drew.
So first of all, I reject the thesis that more automation reduces jobs. It's the opposite, actually. That's a conventional wisdom. It's wrong, okay? When you have more automation, you get more jobs. The reason why is because if you have no automation, then the company goes away. They'll become extinct. They're toast, okay? You cannot be competitive in the global market unless you're automating and becoming more productive every day of the week. So let me give you an example. We bought some robots and some technology to make wire forms that used to be made in India, okay? And now, because we're so effective and so productive, we won that job and we're exporting those wire forms to India and to Mexico and to China. If we hadn't done that enhancement in our robotics and our automation, we would never have had an opportunity. They used to make them by hand in India, okay? But we beat the Indians because we were more productive. We were more efficient. So we have multiple robot operators who are getting paid big coin to run those machines 7 days a week. So those jobs wouldn't have happened unless we went for the robotics and for the automation. Regarding the question of skilled labor, my gosh, it's tough, okay? It's very difficult to hire talent right now. There's a lot of challenges. First, we need our school systems to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. We have many people come to us that can't do those basic skills. We need our public school system to be a conveyor belt of amazing talent, Teach the kids how to read, teach the kids how to write, get the basics done so they can have a good opportunity. Our average wage at the factory is $27 an hour. That doesn't include benefits. It doesn't include overtime. That doesn't include multiple promotion opportunities. This is the kind of thing that we need to encourage our school system to promote and focus on. So yes, it's very challenging to hire talent, and there's just not enough people out there for us to grab onto and offer them a career. We would grow 20% our talent today if we could have a magic wand and hire everybody we need to hire.
And what about you, Arion? What are you seeing with the skilled labor force? Are you having a hard time finding people? And what do you think could be done to improve the skills gap?
In fact, I'm not. We've had more talent than ever, and it's been completely fine. For one thing, I do want to address that there are so many disparities when it comes to access to capital and access to resources and access to talent. Studies have shown that two identical resumes with different names, Luke and Tyrone, would consistently be picked. One would consistently be picked over the other. Additionally, when we talk about bringing manufacturing in-house and taking advantage of talent and skilled labor, we know that access to capital is a big hindrance. I mean, even in venture capital, which is what companies like mine in tech and medical devices traditionally go towards, women get 2% of venture capital. Black women like myself get 0.006% of VC capital. It does not mean that there's a pipeline problem. It does not mean that minority and women-led companies aren't qualified. It means that the powers that be and the investors and funders are not diversifying their pool of resources and providing funding to companies who, quite honestly, are positioned to outperform. We know that women-led companies spend less on every dollar to a white founder's dollar or a white CEO's dollar. We know that diverse and women-led companies outperform when it comes to metrics and valuations and things like that. So for me, when it comes to diversifying the talent pool in Maryland and taking advantage of some of these resources so that some of our manufacturing can be in-house, that means funding for machines that cost $2.5 million. That means grants and opportunities for commercial space. That means access to so many loan opportunities that Black women like myself are traditionally left out of. So I think that it's more of a trickle down effect, and there are some systemic changes that will absolutely need to take place from the top. And once we start to see those changes, we'll start to see all of this become a lot more diverse and a lot more equitable.
And Matt, you obviously talked about the big year you guys had last year and the expansion of space that you guys did. I imagine you're probably hiring workers. Are you having a hard time finding those workers? And if so, what are you doing about it?
We're okay at the moment. We are likely going to be hiring soon again, but initially on, we had a huge demand. We needed to fill a bunch of jobs, and we were very lucky and we were able to do that. Funny enough, a lot of like teachers who weren't really working, or kind of actually high-level workers during this past summer came on to help us out. The jobs that we have are I wouldn't say they're exactly high-skilled, because what we do is we fill bottles and we make simple products, simple skincare products. So the amount of expertise needed is not high. It's very entry level, but with that, there's an opportunity for us to help workers develop skills that they can carry on, and maybe they stick with us for a year or two and move on to a higher level position. But I love what Ms. Long was talking about. We're in Baltimore City, and Mount Rose Oaks in particular is very much invested in the city, and we're very mission focused. And one of my really high priority top goals is how do we really, really improve Baltimore City through a manufacturing lens. And we do it by partnering with institutions and partnering with job force development programs. Hey, Johns Hopkins University Medical Center. Hey, UMMC. Partner with us, shift your supply need to a company like ours or any other manufacturers in the city, and let's create some jobs because it's right there, it's right in front of us. We've learned some lessons from the pandemic. Let's do it. I'm open to partnering with anybody to make this happen. But that is a hugely important topic that I'm continuing to try and talk about, because we can really transform the city and bring equity if we can make some more jobs and just transition this. It's very possible.
So I want to transition a little bit to talking about sustainability. We've seen the Biden administration and Maryland have set big goals for lowering greenhouse gas emissions significantly by 2030. Would love to hear about what manufacturers are doing to help hit these sustainability targets. I guess let's start with you, Dr. Galiazzo, to kind of get the overall industry perspective.
Okay, let me give you a kind of a, well, first of all, manufacturers are working towards becoming more sustainable. It's just part of the definition of the future manufacturing. Larger companies are saying to their supply chain, you need to meet certain standards, okay? But I'd like to talk specifically about some things that we worked on firsthand through the Regional Manufacturing Institute. And Drew, you were my board chairman when we started this project some 10 years ago in offering energy efficiency programs to manufacturers. So for over the last decade, we've worked with companies, over 200 companies. There was over 22,000 megawatts of electricity saved. So that doesn't mean much to most people, but that's a big deal. And so we also work with companies in getting them to be part of the Green Department of Environment Green Registry program. So I think getting people engaged in, there's a number of state programs that are focused, particularly the Department of Environment, on sustainability. And RMI has always encouraged people and manufacturers to look at sustainability as a core value for their organization. So we're moving that direction. The big problem is, collectively, everything that's being done, I don't think is going to put a really big dent in the problem we have with global warming and carbon emissions.
What do you think, Arion? Obviously, you mentioned wind earlier, and Tradepoint's very involved with offshore wind. What do you think manufacturers can do to help, or the manufacturing industry can help do to hit the sustainability targets?
Well, I think it was mentioned earlier, sourcing responsibly, I think that becomes a driver in some of the decision making that happens in the supply chain, boardrooms of some of these larger companies. But, one thing we're seeing here at Tradepoint Atlantic as we build the facilities to accommodate, pretty sophisticated supply chain operations, you're looking at electrification of some of the equipment that maybe had been run by diesel engines. You're also looking at, for example, McCormick is building a 1.8 million square foot facility. Look at that size of that rooftop. They have set a goal to put solar panels on all of that. That's significant power generation where they're going to end up coming out with a net zero, carbon emission as a result of, dedicating that amount of space to a solar array. Home Depot has installed a similar solar array, as well as Amazon. So, and then also kind of the materials used in constructing these buildings, and making sure that the materials are sourced responsibly and that the buildings are more efficiently run through, sophisticated HVAC systems, and other types of, materials that can make the building run more efficiently. So, we are definitely seeing that. Those are choices our tenants are making. It costs them a little bit more upfront in sourcing these materials and building the way that they would build, like a LEED certified building, but they're also looking at the operational costs long term. And I think that the benefits of doing this responsibly and sustainably are definitely outweighing, doing it cheaply out of the gate. So we're definitely seeing that here at Tradepoint Atlantic. And of course, offshore wind, we are very excited about the prospect of that happening here at Tradepoint Atlantic. And again, that's a green energy source that Maryland will play a big role in, and I'll talk about that later on in the panel.
So
And
Holden,
sorry.
I'm sorry, let me add, excuse me, I just wanted to add, the Maryland Energy Administration, I mentioned them, and they are a great source of potential funding for any commercial business. They have a wonderful grant program. They have a wonderful loan program. So if anyone that's listening is interested in seeing how they can benefit by upgrading their equipment in particular to become more sustainable, I encourage you to connect with the Maryland Energy Administration. They also, Aaron, as you know, help people with solar energy as well. But I think that's one of Maryland's best kept secrets, and we really try hard to let people know MEA is really providing the pathway for sustainability in the commercial and industrial section, along with utility companies. They're playing a good role too.
And Arion, I wanted to ask you about sustainability because I know that it's a topic that's near and dear to you. So if you want to talk about, obviously your products are organic. So if you want to talk about how you're approaching sustainability.
Sure. I started my company after experiencing a reproductive health issue that was linked directly to chemicals in 90% of the feminine care products on the market. These products traditionally were designed by men, and I'm of the personal opinion that if condoms cause cancer, men would have a solution within the hour. But anywho, our goal from the start of Femly was to weave sustainability and social impact into everything that we're doing. So we're leveraging certified organic cotton that's grown in Texas. We have a biodegradable feminine care product that cuts down on the overall lifetime cost of feminine care when it comes to the environment. Traditional organizations, even other organic competitors, take 120 years to break down from the point that that tampon or that sanitary pad is thrown away. In many cases, those products are going to outlive the woman who used it. So, with our products, we have biodegradability with an average of about 5 months. They're super beneficial for both people and planet. And along with sustainability and sustainable packaging that is recyclable and biodegradable, we're also looking at our impact, who we hire, how we're thinking about the supply chain when it comes to increasing access and resources for prisons. The average woman right now uses 3 to 4 tampons or sanitary pads a day. And some prisons, women are getting just 8 pads for that entire period. And the average period is about a week. So with us, as we build out, we're not only thinking about how we can build a portfolio of sustainable products that are disposable, we're looking at reusable and washable options like the menstrual cup, which cuts down on the overall feminine care lifetime cost by 80%. You spend $30 on this one teeny product and you're good for 4 years with washing it and reusing it. We're looking at, postpartum hygiene products for women because they haven't been presented with an option outside of the really ugly diaper looking thing you get after you have a baby in the hospital. So for us, sustainability is near and dear to our heart, and it's something that we are going to prioritize as we move forward and build out a product pipeline that supports women from their first period through pregnancy, postpartum, menopause, and beyond.
And Drew, I just wanted to see if you wanted to talk about Marlin's efforts as it refers to sustainability.
So we use steel to make our products, and we buy from American mills. They're not imported, so there's no boats overseas. And our mills are adhering to USA EPA standards, as opposed to how they foul the air in China and overseas. They have coal burning plants that are devastating the environment when you use Chinese steel. When we have any scrap with our steel products, we recycle 100% of it. So we're 100% closed loop. We don't have trash cans full of steel. It becomes another dishwasher or another car or another wire basket somewhere else. So all of our steel, 100% of the steel is used. Mike Galiazzo, Dr. Mike, talked about RMI and MEA and BGE. My gosh, what wonderful resources our state has to up our game for sustainability. And all these companies in Maryland should be exploiting these wonderful assets we have. Marlin took advantage of Mike Galiazzo and BG&E and MEA's programs. And we have wonderful LED lights throughout our facility. It uses much less electricity, and it's brighter, so it's safer for the employees. We also got upgraded, brand new compressor, which uses much less energy. So even though our sales have gone up 50, 60, 70% from when we had these devices installed, our power has gone down by 50%. That is sustainability. Lastly, if our government, Maryland State, and our local community, hospitals, etc., really care about sustainability, they would buy local. Right now, Maryland State, our local hospital systems buy from China, buy from Mexico, buy from Vietnam. This is madness. They should be buying from America. We make it cleaner. When I hire somebody, I'm not hiring a person in Shanghai. I'm hiring a person from Baltimore City, okay? We are in a section of town which needs employment. So if Maryland State were to buy baskets from Marlin rather than from China, or if Hopkins and University of Maryland Medical Center were to buy their products from us, we'll hire more people, we'll have less unemployment. That would really help the community. That'll improve equity because we pay really well. We have great health insurance. Why send the purchase orders to China? Our government officials must demand that they buy local to improve the environment, to improve our communities.
So I guess I want to build off of what you were just saying, Drew, and I know we're winding down here, so this will be kind of our last question. But to build off what you were just talking about, Drew, what do you guys each think Maryland needs to do to continue to be a center for manufacturing innovation? And we'll go to each person, and let's start with you, Dr. Galiazzo.
Okay, real quick, two things. One, the awareness of what is manufacturing has always been critically important to our efforts to attract workers. We talked about workers before. It's well documented that there's a shortage of skilled workers. The fact that people have a negative view of manufacturing, RMI, and I want to mention Maryland Public Television, RMI are partnering, and they are going to produce a 13-part series on Maryland manufacturing. That's great news because just like their farm and harvest program, people are going to be able to learn about the people, the processes, and the products of manufacturing. The second one, very quickly, there is a law that goes into effect July 1 to create a legislative work group. This is with stakeholders and members of the General Assembly to deal with what I believe is the most important issue, and that is the transformation technologies that are changing manufacturing. Drew Greenblatt is an example of that. We need more small to medium-sized companies to be able to harness the power of the wide variety of transformational technologies that are out there to be able to compete with the Chinese.
And let's move to you, Matt. What could Maryland do to help you thrive and remain a center of manufacturing innovation?
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll just hit home again. It's a matter of choice. Our officials need to be lobbying with these institutions and all the power brokers in Maryland and particularly in Baltimore City to make the choice to use companies like us on the panel and many others to supply really important products and services. It just makes sense. You can't. I can't believe that this will be the only crisis that is going to come our way. Like already, the 21st century has been the craziest past 20 years of my life. I'm a millennial, and it is insane. So our city and our state need to be prepared. Like it's right in front of us. It's a simple choice. It'll improve Baltimore City and the state greatly if there's just a commitment to source locally. I think it's pretty clear to me. If one thing we can learn from the pandemic is let's source locally. So come on, Mr. Hogan, come on, all the important politicians, let's go. So thank you so much.
What about you, Arion? I see you shaking your head. I imagine you probably agree with some of that.
Yeah, I definitely think that Maryland can do more when it comes to access to capital and other resources. There are so many opportunities that were presented to us that I initially didn't even think about when I launched a company. For one, we have a product that 51% of the world's population can opt out of and will need every single month, on time, every time. So when it comes to supplier diversity and resources that help smaller companies navigate the minority certification process, women-owned, disadvantaged business certification process, that would be welcome. I'm originally from New York, and quite honestly, Baltimore is one of the most segregated cities that I have ever been in, and it is mind-blowing. But I also know that there's so much potential here. And when we decided to move our organization from DC to Baltimore, we did that with the mindset that we would come to create jobs and come to make an impact and not only benefit from some of the resources that we've been given and the supporters that we've had, but also be that light and that resource for other organizations. So I'm looking forward to doing all of these amazing things and encouraging and demanding better for all of us. And I think that at the end of the day, we'll all win if we hold people accountable and demand what we're owed.
I know you were just talking about this a few minutes ago, Drew, but what could the state be doing to help Marlin Steel thrive and help our manufacturers in Maryland continue to be innovators?
So I think in summary, Maryland has a lot of good things going for it. We have University of Maryland, we have Johns Hopkins, we have this amazing road system. You know, Interstate 95 is extraordinary. We have a brilliant, a wonderful port, BWI airport. All these things are going for us. We talked about a couple things. I'm not going to recap everything that's already been said. Two other things that I think that would really supercharge Maryland manufacturing is making sure our policy leaders change two policies. The first one is the state income tax, and the second one is the death tax. Right now, if you are running a factory or an entrepreneur and you're in Florida, you're in South Carolina, you're in Texas, you have a massive advantage over a Maryland or Pennsylvania or New Jersey or Connecticut or New York factory. You're heavily incentivized to move your factory to South Carolina or to Florida or to Texas because they don't have state income tax there. In addition, they don't have the death tax. So these are very important devices to get rid of, to encourage more people to open factories and grow factories here rather than close them down here and reopen them in Florida or Texas. So I highly recommend our Annapolis policymakers to shift the mindset, because what happens is when a factory closes in Maryland and moves to South Carolina or to Florida, it's the poor people that get hurt. It's the poor people that lose their jobs. Now, the Florida poor people are very happy because they're going to get a job. It's the Maryland poor people that get the shaft. So Annapolis policymakers must quickly change these policies, or many more factories are going to leave Maryland and move out of state. It's very troubling, and this is something that we could do very quickly to improve our environment, our ecosystem, to grow more jobs in our state.
And you want to bring us home, Aaron? What's the outlook for Tradepoint, and why do you think the Maryland and particularly Baltimore can continue to be a center for manufacturing innovation?
Well, I just want to conclude by agreeing with the panelists here. I think one step that we can definitely take as a state and as a region is to source our supply chain, source our manufacturing locally, create an ecosystem where we feed off of each other, where we are able to employ from communities that are typically, see a high level of unemployment. We're able to source locally for our manufacturers to local businesses that are meeting those supplies. So I think if we could look at creating a local ecosystem that can sustain itself through the supply chain and manufacturing operations, I think that's important. I think it would be a really good first step. And again, lessons from the pandemic taught us this, and I think that came out in today's conversation. The other one is to build off of the incentives that the state has put in place. I think the state did take a good step forward in the More Jobs for Marylanders Act that was created several years ago to help incentivize manufacturing. I think we can build off of that, and to help with that, I think to meet Arion's kind of point about access to capital, maybe that's something that program needs to really kind of take a hold of and see how can we provide capital to these manufacturers to grow and sustain themselves in Maryland. And lastly, I think the workforce component, making sure that we have a workforce development program and system that is responsive to the changing needs of manufacturing. I mean, manufacturers are going to be on the cutting edge of technology. So having a workforce system that's able to respond to what the manufacturers need and be able to kind of be nimble in doing so, I think is important. And I'm starting to see that shift. I serve on the Workforce Development Board for Baltimore County, and that is definitely, I think, a shift in viewpoint that the board is trying to take is better understanding what's needed from industry and then adapting our education and workforce training programs to meet that need. So we're not, so we keep up the speed with today's latest technology. So those three things are things that I think the state could work on, and collectively we as businesses and business leaders can look to do. And for Tradepoint, I think that a real bright spot again is offshore wind. I think over the next year you'll start seeing real movement in Maryland's opportunity to bring offshore wind to the state, both in creating a renewable energy source off our coastline, but more importantly, being part of that supply chain. And with that comes the jobs in manufacturing and businesses that can grow as a result of the manufacturing opportunities that would come here from offshore wind. So stay tuned. Hopefully more information and more details and more exciting news coming from Tradepoint Atlantic on that front.
I know we can't wait to cover it at the BBJ. Thank you all so much for coming on and being a part of this panel and having this conversation. All of you are doing tremendous work. You've battled through, the toughest year, at least in my lifetime. So thank you all again for being a part of this. Now I'll turn it back over to Rhonda, who will have a few closing remarks.
Thank you, Holden, for moderating today's discussion, and our panelists for your insight into the future of manufacturing. I think we all agree that the opportunity for growth abounds here in Maryland. From the Baltimore Business Journal, our sponsor CFG Bank and Merit Properties, thank you for attending, and we hope you remain safe and healthy. And don't forget to follow Holden on Twitter at BaltBizHolden for more updates on the manufacturing industry. Have a great rest of your day.